We're halfway there. Are you living on a prayer? Just to paraphrase Bon Jovi right there with the song Living on a Prayer back in the 90s. Hi friends, this reflection's for Laetare Sunday, the fourth Sunday event. Hard to believe, isn't it? We're almost there. So keep going no matter how well it's going or how much it's become an epic fail. There's still time to improve. So don't be discouraged. Now, let's talk about this gospel. Pretty long, isn't it? You ain't seen nothing yet, believe me. I feel like with this gospel is that we see this theme of light and dark, mercy, forgiveness, faith and doubt, kind of interwoven in this parable about the blind man being healed by Jesus. You see, friends, what we look here is that Jesus is the light that dispels the darkness in our society. Even in the first reading, friends, we are reminded, I should rather say in the second reading from St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light, for light produces every kind of goodness and righteousness and truth. Recently, we had to spring our clocks ahead an hour. I know many of us are looking for the days we don't have to do that anymore. But you ever notice that after the first day of winter, we start gaining daylight? And then after the first day of summer, we start losing that daylight. Because you see, friends, when the weather's colder, there's not a lot of sunlight, people are kind of miserable. They kind of fool themselves. They have they probably have a sense of sadness, a sense of depression. Whereas now, as at the time of this reflection you're listening to, people are a little more cheerful. They're a little more upbeat, full of life, pocket full of sunshine, so to speak, that they want to do a lot. And you ever notice that a majority of people would like to rather do things during the day as opposed to night? There's a lot of engagements that happen during the day. Many of us commute to work. Some of us go for runs. They walk our four-legged showstoppers. They participate in prayer vigils outside of abortion facilities. Whatever the case is, there's a reason for that. Because light, brings people out. Darkness tends to be a time for all of us to reflect, pray, sleep, and then rise up the next morning ready to seize it. You see, what we see here, my friends, is that Jesus is the light of the world. There's a famous painting in London at St. Paul's Cathedral that depicts Jesus. And in it, there's a crown of thorns. And people are looking at well, how are you supposed to get out? Well, here's his hand. Reaching at the knob. Well, it's supposed to be a knob, of course. Now, for the blind man that is healed, he kind of saw this as an act of faith. And he goes around telling people, and believe me, it does take a heck of a lot of courage to do this. He goes around and he shares about what has just happened. And people are telling him, well, what happened? These new types of people. And of course, the blind man kind of gets frustrated. I think what we see here, friends, is that we too are going to be frustrated at times when we try to tell people the truth. And I can guarantee you, 9 out of 10 times, they're not going to receive it well. But let's face it, we are in a society that does not embrace truth. That calls drag shows courageous. That calls people going from man to woman or woman to man courageous. That sees women who abort their child as courageous. But those that are outside of abortion facilities are being judgmental. They're harassing women. Parents that are pulling their kids out of a failed public school system because of drag queens, drag shows, whatever the case is, are seen as evil, are seen as domestic terrorists. Families who go to the Latin Mass are seen as domestic terrorists according to the FBI. Here, Jesus dispels the darkness that surrounds us. If we have been paying attention the past few weeks, friends, so week 1, he reminds us about the temptations that are in this world and how we must combat them. Jesus wants us to have him. He wants to transfigure our lives. Let's put it that way. And last week, we hear about this passage that Jesus wants to heal us. He wants to listen to our pleas. What is our first world problems? Because let's face it, he took it on. And we're going to see that soon with the Passion account. He took it on for you and for me. And we're building up to that moment. We just got 2 weeks left, so buckle up, boys and girls. You ain't seen nothing yet, y'all. But seriously, Jesus came to the world to heal us. He came to the world to shatter the darkness with his light. I always remember, I think one thing to keep in mind is that song, This Little Light of Mine. Well, we have to let that shine, folks. You have the light of Christ in you. Every time you receive the Eucharist, you become more like him, as Blessed Carlo Acostas reminds us. We are called to be the children of the light, as reminded in Ephesians. And we too, friends, must use this light to shatter the darkness, to help people come back to their faith. Is it going to be an easy thing? No. Look at the blind man who was healed. He had to tell people time and time again. You see, the light that Christ produces a goodness in us by which we come to resemble Christ himself. We look into the heart of each person we meet and to see reality the way God does. For God, he sees the reality of each and every one of us. Because he loves us. He wants us to follow him. All it takes is humility. All it takes is that drive, that desire for holiness. Mother Mary Frances of Our Lady puts it well. Our Lord has given us an actual happening and letting us take for our lives a spiritual parable of our own blindness or sinfulness, which he heals. In being healed of blindness, we find new courage. How often do we run into born-again Christians? How often do we bump into Catholic reverts? How often do we have doubters believe again? All it takes is your light. Friends, we are the light of the world, and we must shine that light to others. Shine bright, Catholics. It's time to dispel the darkness. God bless.